An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6, Chapter 59, Into the Storm. No force on earth could keep the parchment. The hands belonging to Jaime Lannister trembled violently, eyes staring at the words as if they were a curse. They might well have been a curse. Jaime would have actually preferred that. Uncle, Marcella is dead. Set aflame in a ritual by his highest to destroy the Stark bastard. Mother is inconsolable. The city is gripped in fear. Lord Baelish and Commander Naharis, his highest's new favourite enforcer, are preventing any noble from leaving the city, including me. Please come back. Mother needs you. I need you. Tommen, Lord of Storm's End, Warden of the Stormlands. A tear slipped from his eyes. Little Marcella. Beautiful Marcella. The sweet, kind girl that had inherited none of the Lannister cunning, but all of his mother's golden heart. Burned alive by her own brother. Baelish. Qyburn! They had to have a hand in it. But Jaime knew it was ultimately Joffrey that caused it. Cersei's baby boy. My son. Only he and Cersei knew the truth. The horrible truth that ended up starting the War of the Four Kings, that plunged the entire known world into chaos. There had been others over the years. Jon Arryn was dead, as was Ned Stark and Stannis. Little Bran Stark had to be dead. Jaime suspected Tyrion knew, while their father would most likely be willingly blind to the truth. But it was the truth. The truth that ate away at Jaime more and more. His sister, the woman he loved, was growing more and more callous as her influence waned. His eldest son, once the apple of his eye, was a monster. A monster that had burned his own sister, Jaime's beloved daughter, alive. With Tommen trapped in King's Landing, it didn't take Jaime long to make up his mind. Come hells or high water, he would head back to the capital. Marcella was dead, and Joffrey was lost, but he could still save his youngest. The army hadn't budged from its quarters at Harrenhal in months. Hardened veterans of the War of the Four Kings reminisced at how it was just like then, even at the same decrepit and ancient fortification. Aside from raiding missions by the Second Sons and small detachments sent by Tywin to recapture and fortify strategic locations in the Vale, Westerlands or Southern Riverlands, the army remained at the same location since it had been recaptured after the Battle of the God's Eye. A sense of boredom had fallen over the troops like a shroud, interrupted by a series of heavy drilling ordered by Lord Tarly. Any idiot could conduct that. The army wouldn't miss Jaime. He had no pull keeping him here. Snatching up his saddlebag, Jaime moved towards the entrance of the tent, but was blocked by Bronn. Get out of my way, he growled, but the sellsword didn't move his palm from the golden nobleman's breastplate. You aren't stopping me, Bronn. Think about this. Now your gold-shitting daddy is not likely gonna execute you for desertion. He has a soft spot for you. About as much as that pocket arsehole can. But you'd be going to King's Landing. Bronn lowered his voice so only Jaime could hear him. A pit of vipers. Where the fucking king just burned it alive his own fucking sister to take out the northern bastard. Do you really want to get neck deep in that shit? Jaime didn't hesitate. Yes. Pushing past the sellsword, he untied the mount bound to a hitching post by the tent. He tossed the saddlebag behind the saddle and secured it. As he was about to mount, he heard the sound of the horse behind him being readied for travel. I thought you didn't want to deal with the pit of vipers. Vipers are everywhere in this sorry realm, Bronn muttered, hauling himself onto the horse. Gotta keep you safe, or else I ain't getting my castle. His scowl deepened. The normal banter of the proud lion would shoot back for him quite absent. Land's ravaged, little girls but getting burned alive. This ain't war, it's madness. They broke their horses into a trot for the King's Road, thighs half buried in the snow. Bran nevertheless did not feel the cold. The spiritual would manifest as touch, malevolent magics of the Night King, leaving his body chilled to the bone during his visions. but natural weather did not register to him. Above, the grey clouds deposited the frozen water all over the land, blocked out every other light. Near black. Next to him, he could feel the presence of the raven. Why are we here at midnight? Whenever this is. The raven glanced at him, face devoid of emotion. It is midday. The implication was obvious, even before Bran had begun green-seeing. Old Nan had told him stories of the long night. Here it was. In the darkest of times, the secret of House Stark laid bare before all. Aunt Serena, what's wrong? Bran and the raven turned their heads to see a young man no more than 20 years past his name day. He looked so much like Eddard Stark. The same flowing blonde locks, strong jaw, strong shoulders. Bran the Builder! Bran didn't need to frame it as a question. Instinctively he knew. The raven nodded anyway. Aye, the second of the Unfrozen. Bran furrowed his brows in confusion. Second? Unfrozen? You shall see, he replied cryptically. Raven often answered as such. Serena Stark Targaryen, wife of the Lord of Light, and sister of the man who was now the Night King, looked away, avoiding eye contact with her beloved nephew. I cannot tell you, dear Bran. With her children safe in Valyria with her husband's family, the boy was the closest thing she had to a son right now. She didn't want him to know her pain. But Starks were stubborn. Stop it! I'm not a child. I fought the others. I'm a warrior of our people. Please, don't shelter me. Sighing, the Northern Beauty felt a tear fall down her cheek. Daenerys wasn't there. She needed someone to confide in. I will have to die soon, nephew. The one who would soon become Bran the Builder blinked. What? Why? The last sighting of the dead was nowhere near their camp. I will need to sacrifice myself for your uncle. The tears fell upon the snow. So that he may complete his weapon. No! No one needs to die! Bran knelt by his aunt while his namesake watched in rapt attention. The prophecy says he'll defeat him. Serena shook her head. Not without his sword. And his sword cannot be properly cooled without the heart of an Unfrozen. As the image began to envelop in whiteness, words fading away, Bran finally noticed that Serena Stark wore no cloak. The next landscape appeared suddenly. 1 minute the long night of millennia past was fading away, and now Bran was in the present. He had no reason why he knew, just instinct. Looking back behind him, a vast army of corpses stood in the snow. Motionless, waiting for a command. But in front of him, staring up at the mounted monarch, the malevolent face of the man that used to be Martin Stark. It suddenly turned and bore its ice blue eyes directly at Bran's. Before he could back away, an icy hand clamped itself onto his forearm. Bran screamed, "Ah!" Eyes opening, Bran found himself eye to eye with Mira. The young noblewoman looked concerned. Bran, you were screaming and thrashing in your trance. What happened? Sitting up, he looked at Mira, then to the raven, then back to Mira. Raising his hand, he found the mark of the dead upon him, burned into his skin. While it did not hurt, the flesh was ice cold. The Night King! He knows I'm here. He's on his way. Nearly halfway across the continent, in quarters almost the polar opposite of the cave of the three-eyed raven, another Stark found himself in the middle of a restless sleep. Tossing and turning, his face was drenched in sweat. The images forming in his unconscious mind tormented his sanity, driving him to the point of madness. It tugged at his duty, filled him with a tragedy and perfidy only he could prevent. It was then that Jon erupted into consciousness. He sat up, suddenly, breaths ragged. The fire had died, leaving the bedchamber in a shroud of cold. The Emperor did not notice, memories of his nightmare still vivid in his mind. Or was it a vision? It had seemed so real to him. Shivering in her sleep, Daenerys woke to find the warmth of her husband absent. She looked up and found him in that state. Jon! Jon, my love, what's wrong? Sitting herself up, Dany wrapped her arms around him. Decisively, without another thought, Jon knew what his duty was. I must go now. He is in danger. Looking down on Daenerys, he saw the love reflected in her amethyst eyes. Maester Aemon's words were reflected back. Love is the death of duty. This would not go over well with her. We have positioned these forces at Darry, sire. Tyrion rattled off, placing several markers on the large map table. The Dothraki horde has been split in two. A smaller force of about 5,000 is resting in the still fertile, if snowed-in, grazing grounds between the Red Fork and the Blue Fork of the Trident. He moved his finger to the other cluster of Dothraki screamer figurines. The rest are south of here at the Wayfarer's Rest. Lord Edmure's Riverlanders surround them, making sure they are hidden so Tywin doesn't suspect we can put 22,000 screaming banshees behind him. Jon nodded, impressed at the effort. And the fourth force? I have sent Lord Manderley with his men, and that of Lord Kerwin to Pink Maiden, along with half of the Essos irregulars. Robb interjected, moving several other figurines. A raven from there indicates the last 2 battalions arrived this morning. Could Tywin think we would try another go at Lannisport? Daenerys asked, sizing up the lay of the land. Or march for Stony Sept and take the Gold Road around his flank to the capital? A rather loud belch echoed in the war room. All eyes turned back to Tyrion. Forgive me, your highness, your majesty. He cleared his throat. Lannisport is worthless to him. There is no gold left, and with all possible reinforcements will come from either the south or the Free Cities. Dragonstone is still his, as is Sunspear, so there will be no reason to worry about the Westerlands. Davos speaked up. Unless we cut the sea routes, and that would be bloody and crippling to us if we try. He's sitting pretty with reinforcements. Having experienced naval action as a smuggler, the generals deferred to him. And he can very easily march astride the Gold Road if he wants, your highness. Robb added. He's also kept his brother Kevan, and a force of 10,000 at Hayford Castle, outside the capital. Dornish light cavalry, sellsword captains, and newly raised men from the Reach and Stormlands according to my scouts and Varys' little birds. Not enough to beat us, but enough to hold us back until he can march his army back to the capital. He pursed his lips. Tywin knows we can't dislodge him without a fight, so he doesn't need to worry about what he knows of our positioning. Eyes falling on Riverrun, the largest cluster laid exposed to the Emperor. And we are here, reinforced by more Northerners. Vale infantry, Baratheon levies, secured from the defecting captives, and 4 giants. Still not enough. The largest force that could tip the scale was still in Volantis with Podrick and Yara. All the while, the Golden Company was rumoured to be departing Pentos for Sunspear. Not good at all. All the while, Jon was depleting what meagre forces were left in the north to ward off the greatest threat to them all. We should strike soon, while we still have some element of surprise. Daenerys seemed confident. Why shouldn't she? Jon was back, and all dragons but Edaron were together again. One call and the Grey Dragon would head back as well. A sigh left Jon's lips. Leave us. Whispered murmurs broke out, confused at the Emperor's sudden decision. Your Majesty? Tyrion inquired. I said leave us. Voice firm, the War Council quickly departed. Robb lingered for a moment, a raised eyebrow directed at Jon. Was he going to do it? A slight nod from his brother answered the question. Gods be with him, thought the Lord of Winterfell, guards closing the door behind him. Now the room was left to Jon and Daenerys. Cavernous halls rather empty and haunting. Studying her husband, gouging his mood with expert eyes. Dany found him hunched over the table, eyes heavy, staring at the figurines clustered around the Riverlands and the Crownlands, with a sort of brooding fatigue. Oh, Jon. She stepped next to him, wrapping her arms around his back. What bothers you so, my dragon wolf? Muscles tense, the impotence of his position and the inability to improve it filling him. Jon slammed his fist upon the stone table. Fuck! The tension dissipated somewhat as Dany hugged him tighter, kissing the back of his neck. It felt amazing, but he was too frustrated. It's not enough. Not near enough. Tywin has us outnumbered and holds better ground. Dany frowned. We have better soldiers, Jon. And dragons. Half his forces are sellswords and impressed conscripts. She was confused as to how Jon couldn't see it. Staying on the defensive mean we control the initiative. Sellswords who know that Joffrey winning means continued payment from the complete chaos that follows. Tywin's army knows they are the lords of the world and over everyone else, while we promise no loot and no chaos for profiteers to exploit. He motioned to the formations of Lannisters and their allies over the Crownlands. And he is the one who has the initiative. All avenues he has covered. And no matter where we attack, it was all pre-planned by him. We'll just be dancing to his fucking jig. All the while, the real threat, he trailed off. Eyebrow raised, Dany crossed her arms. What real threat? They were so close. So close to finishing off the insane king and ending his reign of terror. So close to finally restoring their family to their true place in the sun. To break the wheel and bring true peace to the entire realm. And Jon was allowing himself to become distracted. It had been happening a lot over the last weeks. It had been starting to grate on her. Eyeing her suspiciously, Jon answered in a guarded tone. You know what threat. An exasperated groan left Dany's lips. Jon! Look at what you're doing to yourself. You're distracted from your responsibilities. You barely sleep. All you do is train by yourself or with the children. I haven't seen you smile in ages, all because of some legend and superstition you claim as a threat. Dany didn't mean to add the last part, but it slipped out. Jon's eyes widened. Is that what you think? After all we mean to each other, you still don't trust me? He couldn't believe it. It was as if Dany had stabbed him in the heart all over again. In all honesty, part of Daenerys never grasped the idea that there was an army of dead men north of the wall. Joffrey is our enemy, Jon. He is enslaving the world. He sent Euron after our children. He paid an assassin to murder me. All the suffering currently affecting the world is on his and his cronies. When we have a chance to end him permanently, you choose to face a myth. A scary story northern mothers tell their children. It is not a story or a myth, Jon thundered, angrier than he had ever been before. You don't know any better, Daenerys. You didn't fight the fight I've had to. You're right, Jon. I've spent my life fighting for our family. For our birthright. She was not going to back down. Two dragons in a furious game of chicken, neither relenting. And do you know what faith has kept me going since I left all those years ago? Not faith in gods, or myths, or legends. Imaginary fools delude themselves into believing. Faith in myself. Faith in us. The faith that we can hatch dragons and unite people from Last Hearth to Astapor. That is what we need, not some childish boogeyman. Breathing heavily, she glared at Jon, watching as something dark and emotionless settled into his eyes. Lips ironing into a flat line, Jon took a step back. If that is what you feel, then I have nothing more to say to you. I must journey back to Winterfell. Turning, he made his way to the door. Don't you dare leave me! Daenerys was seething, rage burning in her eyes. Outside, a dragon roared, the deep bellow of Balerion the Dread Reborn. Your Empress demands it! Stilling, just by the doorway, Jon's back remained turned, unmoving. In the distance came an even louder shriek, a higher, enraged roar that shook the windows. Rhaegal channeling the pure anger of his rider. It was then that Jon turned. Blazing fury. Daenerys had never seen him so enraged, except when Euron threatened their children. Instinctively she stepped back, but he didn't move. Didn't give in to his anger. He was too good and too honourable a man. All he did was speak one line. Then the Empress will have to kill me. Cloak unfurling, he turned and stepped out of the doorway, towards the north. Biting her cheek, Dany screamed her frustration in his wake. I still think this is a stupid fucking idea. I'd have to agree with the ginger on this one. stated Brienne, earning a huge grin from the wildling, much to her annoyance. A loud howling bled through even the thick ice of the wall, tendrils of blizzards visible from the top of the battlements. Rescuing your brother can be done via Dragonback. If you know where he is.
I know.
Tightening the cloak over his frame, Jon couldn't help but appreciate the irony. He had lived here at the Wall for much of his life, enduring day by day of cold so bitter it could freeze a person's balls off. Now, after nearly a year in the south, months in the raging heat of Essos, he had almost forgotten what true cold was. Winter in the Riverlands couldn't come close.
Don't ask me how, but I know.
Groaning, Tormund turned to Davos and Robb.
Please try to talk him out of this. I can gather getting his brother the cripple, but finding one of those fucking things?
All present had been stunned when Jon announced the addition of the plan, finding it one step above insanity. Even as they were preparing themselves to leave, Tormund, Brienne and Tyene were still trying to steer him to reason.
Don't you think I've tried? Davos shrugged. The Emperor is not one to deviate from something he considers vital.
Tyene persisted, hoping he'd see reason. If you think seeing one of these things will convince Joffrey or Tywin to not make war with us, even for a single campaign season.
It isn't for them,
Jon replied, remembering the harsh words. They were said in the heat of the moment, but he had no qualms as to how real they were.
We're all on the same side. We're all breathing. But I know he won't see it that way.
There was no persuading Joffrey. But in a victory with him dead, unity would be a must.
It's for another. Hold on. Let me get this shit straight.
Tormund stared at Jon.
Your wife no longer believes in the army of the dead. So you want to go into the fucking ice house to get a dead fucker to prove her wrong?
He shook his head.
Wouldn't it be easier to just fuck her brains out?
Lips pursed, fists clenching, Jon looked off into the distance. Rage and anguish at his wife's lack of trust in him was still a raw, gaping wound.
Believe me, it's necessary.
You could still do it off Dragonback.
Lady Martell, Robb interjected. You weren't with us at Hardhome. The Night King easily took down Rhaegal with a spear. If 1-1 hadn't been there, we're not risking our greatest assets for this.
Jon couldn't have said it better himself.
I, with luck, will avoid the main host. Last of those fuckers that Mag gave me, that sighting, was that they were still near Hardhome.
Listening to Tormund, a thought came to Jon.
Wait.
While he and Robb could rely on their Valyrian steel blades and 1-1 on pure strength, the others were at a disadvantage if the Walkers or Whites attacked them.
We need dragon glass weapons, now.
I have that covered, sire. Gendry dropped a sack on the floor, reaching in to hand out forged dragon glass weapons. Worked on them myself last week. Guaranteed to take down any fucking dead man in his tracks. Each man now sported a dagger, a sword, apart from himself and Tormund, who got axes. Grey Worm got a short sword, but an additional spearhead for his main weapon. 1-1, however, didn't need one. His arms and legs were good enough. I shall wait here until you return, Sansa told the men, flanked by bannermen of House Stark. If 2 weeks pass, I shall have Ed destroy the gate to block any entrance to the realms of men. She knew the stakes, much as it pained her to potentially leave her beloved brothers in the icy wilderness. Eastwatch by the sea would still have a means of exit, but it would be a treacherous trek of nearly 100 miles. Not a viable option. Breaking a sensual and passionate kiss with his beloved, Robb made his way to Sansa and hugged her.
Keep Marjorie safe for me, sister.
I will, brother. As the Lord of Winterfell made his way to the group, Sansa found the Emperor standing before her. Jon, the redhead bit her lip, eyes darting to the ground. I don't like this. It's too risky. The Empire cannot afford losing you. The family cannot. Her eyes closed tightly, feeling another flashback coming. Jon saved her from Ramsay, took her in and provided the safety and comfort needed to pull her out of the worst of pain. It still affected her sometimes, and facing Jon's possible death at the hands of the White Walkers caused one of these times. The Emperor pulled his sister into a hug.
Hey, don't worry about me.
Jon had never been close to Sansa in childhood, overjoyed now that they had the same relationship as he had with the other siblings.
I will return.
Sansa, enjoying the brotherly embrace, nevertheless pulled back. That's what Father said. I would imagine Rhaegar Targaryen told Aunt Lyanna the same. Memories came back of 3 smiling, loving faces in a wide expanse of the afterlife. They stabbed at Jon's heart, but he pulled it back.
I won't make their mistakes.
A gnawing feeling overtook him, however, one sensing of some kind of threat.
Sansa, if something happens.
Don't say it, Jon.
If something happens, please make sure Daenerys stays vigilant on the threat to the north. Promise me, Sansa.
I promise, brother. Smiling, Jon kissed the crown of her head.
Oh, and please speak with Sir Podrick Payne when he returns to Westeros. He is anxious to speak with you.
Turning, he walked back towards his men with a small smirk on his face, not seeing but certain of the bright red blush on his sister's cheeks. One not due to the blistering cold. Torchlight covered the tunnel, shadows flickering over the walls. Not a single sound penetrated the cavern. Each man and woman withdrawn into their own thoughts.
I wish I could spare more men, Jon,
whispered Ed, breaking it.
We don't even have enough for skeleton crews, even with what you sent us.
Some of the most recalcitrant Bolton supporters or Lannister prisoners had been gifts to the Night Watch. They were sorely needed.
It's fine, Ed.
Jon looked back behind him.
Pip and the others will be enough.
At that point, the massive iron gate rose, slowly and with loud creaks as the metal groaned against metal.
5 inches of cold, wrought steel,
Jon thought.
Undead giants riding undead mammoths. They could break through.
He looked once more at Ed. The new Lord Commander nodded. He and Sansa would carry out what had to be done if it came to that.
All right, men,
he announced as the gate fully opened.
Let's get it done.
And the party began their long trek into the blizzard. Jon, Robb, Gendry, Sir Barristan, Ser Jorah, Tyene, Brienne, Tormund, Wun-Wun, Pip, and 6 other men of the Night's Watch, all ready to face the greatest evil in the known world. Just as the swirling snow enveloped them, blocking out of the sight of the towering behemoth of ice and rock behind them, Jon heard his children roar. It boomed loud enough over the howling winds, defiant but also mournful, tinged with pain and fear.
I'll be back, my children,
he called out to their minds. The mournful cries melted into the wind as he turned and disappeared into the blizzard. Line break. Fire roaring in the fireplace, a rhythmic, almost automatic display playing out before it. Rage boiling within her, Daenerys stared intensely at the fire, pacing back and forth several times, gripping her head in a silent scream, paced again, and then faced the fire once more. It happened in those exact steps over and over again, beginning to make those present nervous. It was Missandei who spoke up first. Your Highness, please calm down. She flinched slightly at her murderous stare, but kept her composure. At least take a seat. Who does he fucking think he is? If the silver hair and violet eyes didn't show off our Targaryen, the metaphorical dragonfire spearing from her would have made it crystal clear. How dare he do this? I gave him everything in my power, and now he abandons our cause to protect from some myth. I admit, Your Highness, Missandei was her longest friend after Ser Jorah. She instinctively sided with her on all things else, with the woman that had freed her and all her fellow slaves from bondage. But the translator had also gotten to know the man formerly known as Jon Snow, a man that matched and complemented Daenerys as if some divine plan. Her loyalty to the Empress extended to her Emperor as well. It is far-fetched, but would you know your husband to lie to you? For Robb Stark, Marjorie Tyrell, or Sir Davos to lie? Lady Martell has gone with him as well, as has Lady Brienne. Lady Sansa believes him. Are all of them foolish too? She realised what a ledge she was putting herself on for something she found sceptical, but some part of Missandei knew that Emperor Jon would never believe something that wasn't true. It just was not his way. Nursing a drink, not his first of the night despite Shay's prodding, Tyrion pushed himself off the chair.
I don't doubt he believes, Lady Missandei. The Northerners are superstitious folks. More so than any aside from the Dothraki, he ended up adding. I saw it at Castle Black with His Majesty's uncle. Never saw anything, but relied on his superstitions.
Then Arthur wanted to roll her eyes. No one thought dragons could return from extinction, nor that a man could be resurrected from the dead. But they did happen. Is it too much of a stretch for there to be an army of dead men? Especially if one's so many level-headed friends and loved ones claim to have seen with their own eyes. Pausing mid-pace, Dany turned to look at her friend and handmaiden. Dragons have existed in recorded history, Missandei. And I don't know what... She pointed at Melisandre, quietly observing from her chair in the corner of the solar. She did to bring Jon back from death. But there had to be some natural reason for it all. The Long Night? The White Walkers? They are all legends. If we cannot reason with what force brought such about, then the only conclusion is that the legends are apopherical. I cannot pronounce that. Lies, fantasy, and my Jon. Another groan of frustration left her. An ancient voice, low and hobbled with a lifetime of experience and pain, spoke up.
It is not wise to confine oneself to that which can be seen.
Pushing himself out of his chair, Aemon Targaryen's back was bowed. His legs were wobbly, and he leaned his entire form upon his cane. Both the old man's unseeing eyes still sparkled a pure amethyst of a sharp Targaryen mind.
I have lived through much. Lived to see my family disgrace itself, die all around me, and be reborn. I have seen monsters, giants, dragons, every creature known to man.
Nearly collapsing, Daenerys rushed to her great-uncle and helped him into a seat near hers. Please, uncle, don't exert yourself, she cautioned. Aemon waved her off.
I understand what you think. I myself have contemplated it. But the majesty of existence, it cannot be explained by reason alone. We humans are too frail, too weak to accept the hubris of supreme thought.
Daenerys found herself unable to respond. What could one say to that? The door to the solar was flung open, slamming against the wall with a loud thud. Through the doorway came Catelyn Stark.
Your Highness!
Her appearance was one of a corpse, drained of blood as if exposed to the most frightening sight imaginable. Beside her was Lord Varys, his ruddy face similarly as white as snow. Daenerys stood, fearing the worst.
What is it?
There was silence. Tell me! There wasn't much to shock the spider, but this did.
One of my little birds in the capital, Your Highness. Joffrey has done something. Something monstrous.
Tyrion rolled his eyes, a move he would soon regret.
What was it this time? Did he use a crossbow on his horse? Because he's already done that.
Wordlessly, Catelyn handed a dispatch to Tyrion.
There was a ceremony in King's Landing. A ceremony of fire and blood to bring death upon an enemy. In this case, Jon.
Dany's eyes widened.
It was the Red Woman's turn to stand. A ritual of blood sacrifice?
Such was common among the early followers of R'hllor, but abandoned largely and replaced with that of leeches.
That is impossible, not to mention blasphemous. And to take down a monarch, it requires one of royal blood, not a normal... They found someone. Tyrion stumbled, falling on his ass. The pain didn't seem to register. His body numb. Marcella? His sister?
Asked Daenerys, wishing it wasn't true. She had heard many things.
Nodding, Tyrion fought the urge to vomit. Sweet, innocent Marcella. His favourite. No more. Killed by that vicious idiot. The battle failed, but he managed to make it to the chamber pot before puking his guts out. A sinking pit of ice formed in Dany's gut. Robert Baratheon's grandmother was a Targaryen. His children of the blood of kings. Oh, God! The sheer scale of it all hit Dany like a stampeding mammoth. Joffrey burned his own sister alive so that her royal blood could kill Jon. Lady Melisandre, she said, whipping around to face the Red Priestess. If this curse works... The Emperor is in danger, Your Highness. Danger of imminent death. Her mind was already filling with incantations on how to block the dark magic before it destroyed the prince that was promised. What have I done? Swallowing her bile and pain, she raced out of the solar. Not a contrary thought in the world. Footsteps followed, the unmistakable warmth of her hands. Do not try to stop me! I need to save him. I would say this is foolish, Your Highness. Tyrion began, struggling to keep up with her furious strides. His short legs annoyed him sometimes. But I know that when it comes to your husband, you'll do it anyway. My fault. Dany blinked away the tears, painful images flashing before her eyes. Images of Jon. Of death. All my fault. Balerion, come! She called out, hearing his roar a split second later. She had made it in the nick of time before the Battle of the Bastards. Hopefully, lightning would strike twice. Climbing onto Balerion, Daenerys did something she never thought she would do. She prayed. Gods, whichever ones exist in the heavens, please let me save my beloved. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that because, oh boy, that was intense as well. Yeesh. But I think it's good that Jon and Dany do have these arguments. Every couple has their rows. I've seen it before. Oh boy, that was... I did the last chapter just before this one, so my throat's really sore. And of course, Brienne having to dodge Tormund's flirting. I'm just trying to find some comedy in this. And of course, Jaime going with Bronn to save little Tommen. Oh boy. Good luck, boys. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Check out my other videos and remember to like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!